Hi, and welcome to Deep Dive Movie Reviews with me, James Marsh, and Steve Hackman. Today, we are talking about Iceland's entry into the Best International Film category of this year's Oscars, which is Valdimar Jóhannsson's Lamb.
Hey, before we get going, if you haven't subscribed already, it would be a big favor to us if you went ahead and subscribed. Thanks again to all new subscribers out there. Welcome along on the film journey. And as always, feel free to comment in the comment box below. We'd love to hear your perspective on Lamb. Tell us a little bit about Lamb, James.
Okay, Lamb. This is a funny one. Okay, so takes place in, as far as we can tell, present day Iceland. We have a young couple played by called Maria and Ingvar, played by Noomi Rapace, who people should recognize from Girl with a Dragon Tattoo and a whole bunch of other stuff. And Hilmir Snær Guðnason. I'm not saying that again, as her husband Ingvar. And they are farmers in a remote part of Iceland. They have a sheep farm. And we learn very quickly that they have suffered some kind of tragedy, some kind of loss. Something is out there on the moors in the mist that is upsetting the sheep, and does more than upset the sheep, as one morning they discover that one of their ewes has given birth to, at first, we're not even shown exactly what it is, but Maria decides to take let's call it a lamb, in and separate it from the mother and raise it as her own. And we do eventually see that this is some strange hybrid, half lamb, half human kind of character. And when, particularly when Ingvar's brother, Peter, played by Björn Hlynur Haraldsson, shows up, he very quickly points out, this is weird, and starts questioning their choices. But they have made their choice. As far as they're concerned, this is their child, and they are going to raise it as theirs, much to the chagrin of the mummy sheep, as well as everybody else. So, Steve, where to even begin with Lamb?
Ooh, okay. I quickly realized in this film, I have to throw the normal parameters of reality out. If I'm going to enjoy this film, you can't be nitpicking minor things, because the reality is, once you realize this sheep has given birth to a half human, half sheep hybrid, and nobody's going, what the beep is that? And we got to take this to a government facility somewhere, because this is the strangest crap I've ever seen. They're so nonchalant about it that you don't even realize it's a hybrid. Like you said, it's not revealed until maybe a few minutes later, after they've already established that whatever is coming out of this sheep, and they keep showing the sheep's heads, you have no reason to believe it's other than a sheep, and they have a particularly fond affection for this sheep, as opposed to the many other births that they have already kind of established that they do regularly. Mm-hmm. And obviously it quickly becomes apparent, as you said, it's a hybrid. So the watcher of this movie has to realize there is mythic land, there is reality, and this film occupies a space in the middle of this. It's not a completely mythic land. We're not in Narnia, where animals and people are talking and we're not in a purely realistic land. That this movie has really established, and that's why Iceland kind of works so well for this film, is it almost tries to exist between two worlds. There seems to be two worlds at play here. And what I loved about this film was, and again, it took me a while to appreciate this. In fact, I don't know if I appreciated it fully until after I was finished watching it, was how minimalist this film really is. It explains almost nothing. The normal way that this movie would typically unfold is the hybrid is born, and then they go to some shaman or some person at the university or someone who's knowledgeable, who's been for part of a secret society that for hundreds of years has been documenting this. And they fill us in on the whole backstory of hybrid sheep I think they're called Dirids or Dirids, or I think there's an actual name in Icelandic for this kind of creature. But none of that is given. This couple simply accepts this child, this hybrid child, and takes it as their own. And we as the viewer have to just accept that they see no issue with this whatsoever. The brother comes, puts up a slight issue, like, that's an animal.
What the hell is
you
that?
guys, what the hell is that thing? And the brother's going, listen, you do not judge us. You can stay as long as you like, but do not, this is a settled matter. Mm-hmm. And so once you kind of establish, okay, this is the table that's set. You're either going to enjoy this or you're not going to enjoy it. Then you just kind of sit back and you enjoy this development of this couple bonding with this hybrid and watching. I mean, it's weird watching this. Once they really reveal that it's a hybrid. I don't know if you're asking the same questions I am. It's like, is this thing ever going to speak? Is it sentient? How intelligent is it? Is it animal? Is it human? Little elements of bestiality creep into this movie, which is a little bit disturbing at times. So my jury still, I'm processing this movie still. I have a score set in my mind for this, but this is one of the most, on reflection, at first, when I got to the end of this film, I'm going, what the hell was that? But I found myself going back and rewatching segments of it and actually being enticed by it. There's an enticing element to this film. And so, yeah, that's my initial thoughts. I'm rambling a little bit, but
it's great.
This movie's kind of drawn that kind of response out of me.
Yeah, no, I think I was fascinated by your response. Yeah, I mean, in some ways, it's kind of a bit like Titane. It's like, if that was a film where you're really wrestling with, how literally am I supposed to be taking this? How much of this is allegory? How much of this is pure fantasy? This goes much further. So on the one hand, I mean, for me, it felt like that there are two very sort of distinct and separate films that it's trying to meld together. Mm-hmm. On the one hand, you've got this very grounded story of grief and loss about a couple who have lost their baby, yes, and will do whatever it takes to replace that hole that it has left in their lives, regardless of the judgment of anybody else around them. They are fortunately in a place of incredible isolation where they don't have to face sort of daily judgment from a community, but obviously the brother represents that. But they have found an answer. They have found a solution to their healing. They found a pathway to healing, essentially. Yes, it's an incredibly weird sort of monstrosity, you might say. However, it's working for them. Mm-hmm. It does fulfill the need that they need it to survive. And those are all very recognizable and plainly understandable human emotions. And the film is as much as anything else, it is that story. And it's the story just of a family, on the mend, essentially, getting through some great, horrible tragedy. On the other hand, you have this kind of folk horror fantasy about the Diorid, or whatever he's called, who wanders off the mountain into their farm, has his wicked way with at least one of the sheep, and creates this kind of spawn of goat boy, or whatever you want to call him, that is half sheep, half boy, who is then being forced to integrate into human society as opposed to live its life as a sheep. And it kind of wants to explore that as a kind of, as a kind of folk horror, fantastical, mythological mystery. Now, for me, I would have enjoyed either one of those movies, I think. What I don't think the film does wholly successfully is merge those two ideas in a way that lets either of them be fully successful or come to an ending. And in that regard, the film ends up kind of like Ada, the baby, is that it's half one thing and half another, and can't quite decide in which world it belongs.
Right.
And and I think there's an artistry to accomplishing that and having the film be both of those things successfully. But I don't feel that the film quite manages to be either of them wholly successfully. And arguably, I wanted it to go more into the fantasy, more into the horror. It seemed content simply to introduce that side of it, and then just kind of leave it.
Very minimalist. That's the word I keep thinking in this movie. Is it's the horror and the supernatural, and that element that you're looking for, and I'm looking for as well, was very minimalist. And I think I agree with you. I would have liked to see a little more of that fleshed out. The problem is, just when we're getting absorbed in the family coming together and bringing this new element into the family, we're at the end abruptly thrust into the fantastical element, and it's so in your face, and it happens so quickly that we're like, did that just happen? And wow, that's a whole different movie. And
the film doesn't give you the time to process it until after the film, like you were saying, that you spent so much time after the film was finished, sort of processing it in your head and working out, what worked and what didn't for you. And I just wish that the film had actually spent more time on that stuff. Whether it's the mother sheep, the ewe, sort of wandering around, sort of almost stalking the house, looking for her offspring, or whether it's the gun-toting diary at the end. It was just these flashes of, oh, that's really interesting horror there. That's really interesting fantasy right there. But it's not enough. It doesn't scratch that itch enough for me. It doesn't fulfill. It doesn't fulfill its promise, if you like.
Yeah. I mean, there is that moral message where essentially Noomi Rapace, she gets so bothered by the sheep hanging around looking for her child that she eventually just shoots her dead. In the same way that Didiriad shoots the husband at the end. It's almost the same scene where he's just shot right straight on. And there's almost an element of, you shot and killed my mate, now I'm going to shoot and kill your mate in the same exact way. Because it wasn't Noomi Rapace that was killed, it was the husband that was murdered. And so it was kind of a tit for tat. But when the Diriad, or the final hybrid, the father, is revealed, he's mostly male, with male genitalia, like human genitalia, which begs the question of bestiality at the beginning of the film. Like, why is this thing going into the sheep farm? And I'm thinking, am I watching episode 1 of Black Mirror here? This is there's elements in this film that get a little disturbing if you start thinking about them too much. So that's.
Well, I was curious, to what degree that was supposed to be this kind of reversion of masculinity to some kind of feral, animalistic survival instinct. I don't know if you've seen the poster for the film, and this is something I really wanted to ask you about. The poster for the film is very iconographic. It's Noomi Rapace holding like a lamb. Not a mutant lamb, but a regular lamb. But it's in kind of the pose of like the Madonna holding baby Jesus.
Oh, I have seen it.
It's holding the lamb. Actually, there are images of the Madonna holding a lamb, right? The Lamb of God kind of. Yeah. And it's really evoking that image. And I was curious as to what you thought about that, why you thought they were trying to evoke that image, and how successful they were in doing that.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't connected those dots. I have seen the poster. I hadn't given it a lot of thought, but now that you say that, I see that image. And I mean, obviously, if you wanted to view it through that lens, there is that element of this sheep was basically impregnated by a much higher superior being, and the offspring of that is, like Christ, half God, half man. or all God, all man. However,
Mhm.
this isn't a theology.
No, exactly.
You know?
No, I think you're safe.
Yeah. But and so yeah, no, that I hadn't actually connected those dots, but that's a good point, James. That's and now they have to. Then you have Joseph, the of course both of the parents are really playing the Joseph role of adopting this child in
Mm.
and raising it as their own. It makes me wonder with the writers, was it written and directed by the same person? Do you?
It was written and directed by Valdimar Jóhannsson, but he collaborated with somebody else called Sean. I don't know who that is, but
yeah, because I'm just wondering why, if he's wanting to make a movie about grief and restoration and processing, like you said, that film is here. And you're wondering why they add this other element, but they leave that element so minimalist where, and because usually when you want that kind of fantastical film, you want a little more filling in what's being cooked there. And this movie doesn't give you, I mean, I don't think the brother said more than 75 words. Even the dialogue in this film is very minimal. You're going to get long scenes of people walking and chewing and looking at each other, and they're beautifully filmed, and the Iceland's beautiful, and you get that whole feeling of isolation, which obviously the director's trying to create. Like you said, there's no prying eyes, there's no busy neighbor that's wondering, well, why do you got a hybrid kid? This is a completely isolated story, which if we didn't have a television, we wouldn't know there's anybody else on the planet.
Right. Pretty much. I mean, yeah, it's fascinating because they're incredibly sort of isolated. There's no one else there. I mean, but why make the religious icon connection if you're not going to explore that too much? I think it is this idea of a sort of a virgin birth, if you like, or unto us a child is given, and now it's our responsibility. Almost, who would we be if we didn't take on this responsibility to do it? There's also this suggestion that there has been a past relationship between her and the brother, because he keeps trying it on with her whenever they get kind of a quiet moment, and she's like, no, told you we're not doing that anymore, or whatever. There's a suggestion that that he has been, or they have been, romantically involved at some point in the past, albeit briefly, and then like nothing really kind of comes of that. But there was something else.
Is that a European thing? Because when I was watching that, I'm just thinking,
I think he tread very carefully, but
he makes the move on her. She shuts him down, and then later she makes it again. And then I'm thinking, on your sister-in-law with your brother, and I just, that's a world I don't exist in. So
but there's very few options, right?
Yeah. Well, the thing is, because of the isolation. But and here's the thing, James, which kind of irritated me about this aspect of the film, is that this film obviously needed moments to remind you there's something going on besides just people walking around and doing things. So this element is thrown in there, but again, it doesn't, for me, it doesn't connect with the rest of the story. I love the whole element where the brother thinks it's an animal. I'm going to shoot this thing. I'm going to put it out of its misery when my brother and sister-in-law are away. They can't do it. I'm going to do what's best for that. And I'm going to put this thing out of its misery. And then he realizes the humanity in this creature. And the next scene, they're hanging out together. I thought that kind of stuff worked when Peter is becoming the convert to their understanding of what the family is. That worked for me. I was enjoying that aspect. But when he turns around and then tries to shag his sister-in-law, it's like, okay, that's you're crossing the streams for me. This doesn't work for me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess is Iceland. I mean, Iceland has a population of about 350,000 people, the whole country. I know a guy from Iceland, and he's just like, everybody, literally everybody knows everybody. Because it's that, if you don't live in Reykjavik, then you're literally living here. you know, in the middle of nowhere, and there isn't anybody for miles and miles and miles and miles and miles. So I guess, you know, within your age bracket, within your geographical location, options are very, very limited. And yeah, sure, it's still a crappy thing to do, to hit on your brother's wife. But yeah, so that's why I kind of wanted just a little bit more of an explanation. You know, are they trying to suggest that Peter, the brother, was the father of the first child who died? No, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a bit of a stretch, but possibly.
It's a stretch, but it's like, at the same time, why bother with that bit of conflict if it doesn't relate to anything else? You know, if it's not part of the larger scheme of things, why throw it in there? Because it's not addressed really. You know, it doesn't cause any additional conflict. You know, in the end, she just like puts him back on the bus and off he goes. And the brother, the husband never finds out, does he? I don't think.
No, I don't think he does. No.
Yeah, and so it's just like, why is that a thing if it's not going to be a thing? I mean, I
thought she was going to kill him. I thought she was going to kill him. That when she locked him in that room, I thought she was going to I thought she was going to gas him. I thought she was going to play the piano and there was going to be gas seeping in there. She was just going to put him on. I really thought that's what's happening. But
so I think the other thing that the story obviously is an allegory for, that I think can be argued, is adoption. You know, because they've obviously gone through this traumatic experience. They've got the opportunity to bring a new baby into their life. It's not theirs. You know, it is kind of alien. And there are those, and then sort of the birth parents are back on the scene going, we want it back. And I suppose you could see it as a discussion or a contemplation on nature versus nurture. You know, and who has the high ground there, and you know, is it, or just nature versus nurture in general, and you know, what's more important and what is the greater influence. And I think that's why it kind of ultimately left me somewhat frustrated, is that it creates this very bizarre, you know, setup with some very clear allegorical issues. You know, it is about grief, it is about loss, it is about adoption, I think, and it is about these things. But then it's addressed within a very bizarre, fantastical, mythological, almost horror film setting, but only to a degree. You know, I don't think it ever fully exploits the possibilities of having those fantastical elements, almost to the point of going, well, why bother then? I mean, I'm glad the film exists. I'd rather it existed than didn't. I don't think it fails in what it accomplished. I think it only achieves. I just don't think it achieves as much as it promises in its premise, I think. And so ultimately I was left a little bit kind of underwhelmed because it is such an odd situation. And the characters do behave so strangely, but yes, so empathetically at the same time. But at the end, you're kind of going, oh, that's it. Okay.
Yeah. And, you know, emotionally, I was quite affected by the end of this movie. I was sad. This is a spoiler show. This has a very, very sad ending. When that poor child, and you come to really, myself as the viewer, have an affection for this child and the relationship that she has with her adopted mom and dad, when her natural born father shoots his adopted father and he's forced to witness it. And then basically you can see him just staring, doesn't know what to do. And then he takes her by the hand and he's looking, or she's looking at her dead adopted father, or dying, and is just carted off, you know. And I just thought, and then poor Noomi Rapace, she shows up, she realizes, one, now I've lost a second child, and now I've lost my husband. And the movie ends, and it's like, there is no good that happened at the end of this film.
She's all alone.
Yeah, she's all alone. And well, maybe now she'll get the brother back. I don't know.
she'll get the next bus, and she'll go again.
But you know, and I felt sorry for the poor child. He had a nice warm home with clothes and a warm meal. Now he's got to go live in a cave somewhere. I don't know where he's going off to live. We don't know where dryads live. But
well, this is it. And I think as the film goes on, I think, you know, the baby Ada becomes more and more human.
Yes, definitely.
To the point where you're looking in the and it always retains a kind of a sheep's head, if nothing else. And you were saying that you get to that point at the end and you're looking at the face of this creature and you're feeling so much compassion and so much empathy and so much sympathy for them.
Yes,
but it's still this complete
happening. Yeah,
but it's still this complete abomination. On the other hand, and yet they've achieved so much. So I think there's this great sort of nature versus nurture argument to it, that no, they weren't the birth parents, but they were the ones that gave it love and gave it a shelter and fed it and kept it warm and all the rest of it. And it was showing, it was rubbing off on the child. The child was evolving in a healthy and positive environment and was thriving. And just because, the goat man or whatever he's called, the diarrhea has, is the biological father. He can just wade in, claim what is his, and lead it away, going, this is what's best for you. This is where you belong. And I don't think anybody agrees with that at all. So anybody in the film or anybody watching the film would be like, oh, that kid's going to be just fine.
No, that's the thing. You're thinking, well, this kid doesn't have a good life. All right, James. Well, hey, what do you give Lamb as a final score? What do we do? Lamb chops? How many? I don't know what our metric should be in this one.
How many? Just lambs, I guess. I don't know.
How many ewe lambs do you give?
Okay, so I think there's a lot of promise, there's a lot of potential, there are a lot of great ideas. It's an incredible premise. I'm not entirely sure that they've succeeded in justifying quite all of them necessarily. I'm going to give it 3 out of 5. I thought it was great as far as it went. And the effects are good as well. And but I wanted it to go further. Yeah. And I think that's my only real reservation. And it did leave me sort of coming away feeling a little dissatisfied. But I think that I'm always, I mean, the films I tend to like the most are these kind of films where it is sort of, it's within a kind of horror genre or fantasy genre, but then deals with very grounded, real things. But it has to fulfill on its promise of being, if it's a horror movie, it has to be scary. If it's a comedy, it has to be funny. Those are just the basics. And I think here, it sets up a lot of weirdness that it doesn't fully capitalize on or fulfill. So, three poor little lambs out of 5, I think.
James, you've said it all for me, and I'm not copying you. I'm giving 3 as well. It's a movie that I recommend that people can see. You'll enjoy aspects of it. I certainly did. I thought it was beautifully shot. I thought Noomi Rapace, and I'm not even going to attempt the husband's name, but Ingvar, the husband. I think both of them just were able to communicate so much emotion, even without speaking. It's wonderfully cast. But I agree with your critiques of this, and I've already mentioned that. So I'm going to give this 3 ewe lambs as well.
Excellent.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward to what we do next. I think we have to discuss that. We'll let you all know about it
for sure
as soon as we can. Till next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.